Ambassador Kim Tae-ho walked slowly down the long metal corridor leading to the Galactic Council chamber. His footsteps echoed in the empty hallway, making the only sound in the massive space station. The walls around him were covered with symbols from hundreds of different alien species, but not one single human symbol could be seen anywhere behind him walked Captain Lee Min-ho, whose face showed the scars of many battles fought in the dark corners of space. The captain wore his military uniform with pride, but his hand stayed close to his weapon. He knew today would be different from all the other days they had come to this place for. 20 long years Kim Tae-ho had served as the human ambassador to the Galactic Council. 20 years of asking for fair treatment, 20 years of being told no, 20 years of watching alien species treat humans like they were nothing more than primitive animals who had somehow learned to build spaceships. The massive doors to the council chamber opened with a loud hiss. Kim Tae-ho stepped inside and looked around at the huge room that could hold thousands of beings. The ceiling was so high he could barely see the top, and the walls curved in a perfect circle around the speaking platform. In the center around the chamber sat representatives from over 200 alien species. The Vorthak, with their 4 arms and gray skin, looked down at him with obvious disgust. The Zilani, with their bird-like features, whispered among themselves and pointed at the human delegation with their long clawed fingers. The Kree Empire representatives sat in their special chairs that looked more like thrones than normal seats. At the front of the chamber, on the highest platform, sat High Chancellor Vextar. His massive body was covered in thick blue scales, and his 4 eyes glowed with an inner light that made him look even more intimidating. He was reading something on a datapad and did not even look up when the human delegation entered. Kim Tae-ho had seen this same scene hundreds of times before. The aliens would ignore him while he spoke. They would whisper jokes about humans being too young and stupid to understand real politics. They would deny whatever request he made and then act like they were doing humanity a great favor by not throwing them out of the galaxy entirely. But today Kim Tae-ho carried something different in his jacket pocket. Today he had orders from Earth that would change everything forever. He had spent the last 3 days reading and rereading those orders, making sure he understood exactly what he was supposed to do. The chamber slowly grew quiet as more and more aliens noticed the human delegation had arrived. Kim Tae-ho walked to the speaking platform in the center of the room. His boots made loud, clicking sounds on the metal floor that seemed to echo forever in the huge space. Captain Lee Min-ho took his position at the back of the platform. His eyes moved constantly around the chamber, watching for any sign of danger. He had been in enough battles to know that sometimes the most dangerous enemies were the ones who smiled and pretended to be friends. High Chancellor Vextar finally looked up from his datapad, his 4 eyes focused on Kim Tae-ho with the same bored expression he always wore when dealing with humans. The other alien representatives stopped their conversations and turned to watch what they expected to be another pointless human request. Kim Tae-ho stepped up to the speaking microphone and looked out at the hundreds of alien faces staring back at him. He had practiced this speech many times, but now that the moment had arrived, he felt a strange calm settle over him. He began to speak in a clear, strong voice that carried to every corner of the massive chamber. He talked about the 20 years of human service to the galaxy, how human ships had helped rescue alien colonies when pirates attacked, how human scientists had shared their discoveries with other species, how human diplomats had worked to prevent wars between different alien groups. He reminded the council about the trade agreements that always seemed to benefit everyone except humans. He talked about the territorial disputes where human colonies always seemed to lose their claims to alien settlers. He mentioned the times when human ships had called for help and council fleets had been too busy to respond. The aliens listened with the same expressions they always wore when humans spoke. Some looked bored, some looked annoyed, a few seemed to be sleeping. The Vorthak representative was still reading his datapad and making notes like the human ambassador was not even there. Kim Tae-ho spoke about the latest incident where pirates had attacked 3 human mining colonies. The human government had asked the council for help tracking down the pirates. The council had said they would look into it, but 6 months later, nothing had been done. Meanwhile, the same pirates had attacked 2 more human settlements. He talked about the council voting rules that required unanimous agreement for any major decisions. This meant that any single alien species could block any proposal they did not like, since many species did not want humans to have more power in the galaxy. Most human requests were blocked before they could even be seriously discussed. When Kim Tae-ho finished his speech, the chamber was completely quiet. High Chancellor Vextar slowly put down his data pad and looked at the human ambassador with his four glowing eyes. The massive alien leader seemed to be thinking about something, but his expression showed no emotion at all. Finally, High Chancellor Vextar spoke. His voice was deep and powerful, and filled the entire chamber without any need for amplification. He said the same things he had said every time before. Humans were too young to understand the complexities of galactic politics. Human emotions made them unreliable partners in important decisions. The Council appreciated human efforts, but they were not ready for equal treatment. The other alien representatives nodded in agreement. Some of them made clicking sounds with their mouths that Kim Tae-ho had learned meant they were laughing. The Zilani representative spread her wings in a gesture that showed she thought the whole discussion was a waste of time, but this time something was different. Kim Tae-ho did not look disappointed or angry like he usually did after being rejected. Instead, he smiled. It was not the polite, diplomatic smile he usually wore. It was something else entirely. Something that made several alien representatives shift uncomfortably in their seats. Kim Tae-ho reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small silver device. He placed it carefully on the speaking platform and pressed a button on its side. Immediately, every communication system in the chamber activated. The device was broadcasting whatever he said next to every corner of the galaxy. The alien representatives suddenly realized something was wrong. They began to whisper urgently among themselves. High Chancellor Vextar stood up from his throne-like chair. His massive body towered over the speaking platform. As he stared down at the human ambassador, Kim Tae-ho looked up at the towering alien leader and spoke in a voice that was calm and clear and completely without fear. He said that the human delegation was formally withdrawing from all diplomatic relations with the Galactic Council. He said that humanity had tried the Council way of doing things for 20 years, and it had not worked. He announced that from this moment forward, humanity would handle all future conflicts using their own methods. He said humans were done asking for permission and done begging for fair treatment. He said the Council had shown them exactly what they thought of human requests, and now humanity would show the Council what they thought of alien authority. The chamber erupted in chaos. Alien representatives jumped to their feet and began shouting in dozens of different languages. The Vorthek delegates were clicking their mandibles in anger. The Zilani were screeching and flapping their wings. The Kree representatives were pounding their fists on their throne-like chairs. High Chancellor Vextar raised one of his forearms, and the chamber slowly grew quiet again. He looked down at Kim Tae-ho with an expression that was part anger and part disbelief. He said that humans could not simply abandon diplomacy. He said there would be serious consequences for such actions. Kim Tae-ho looked up at the massive alien leader, and his smile grew even wider. He said that humanity was counting on there being consequences. He said humans had spent 20 years learning exactly what those consequences would be, and they were ready for all of them. Captain Lee Min-ho stepped forward and stood beside his ambassador. His scarred face showed no emotion, but his hand was now resting openly on his weapon. The message was clear to everyone in the chamber. The age of human diplomacy was over, and the age of something else entirely was about to begin. Kim Tae-ho picked up his silver device and walked away from the speaking platform. Captain Lee Min-ho followed him, keeping his eyes on the alien representatives who were still shouting and arguing among themselves. The two humans walked out of the chamber, leaving behind 20 years of failed negotiations and broken promises. As the massive doors closed behind them, Kim Tae-ho allowed himself one last look back at the chaos they had left behind. Soon the aliens would learn that humans had been preparing for this moment for much longer than anyone suspected. Soon they would discover that the species they had dismissed as primitive and weak had been hiding secrets that would change the balance of power in the galaxy forever. The real war was about to begin. 3 days passed after Kim Tae-ho walked out of the Galactic Council chambers, and the galaxy began to see what happened when humans stopped asking for permission. The first response came exactly as every human military leader had predicted it. would come with violence and destruction aimed at innocent people. The attacks started before dawn on 5 different human colony worlds scattered across the outer rim of the galaxy. The pirates came in ships that looked old and beaten but carried weapons that were definitely not old or beaten. They struck fast and hard, hitting the colonial defense centers first, and then moving on to the civilian population centers on the bridge of the human battleship Indomitable. Admiral Park So-young watched the emergency reports flowing in from the attacked colonies. Her face showed no emotion, but her hands were clenched into fists as she read about the casualties. The pirates had not just attacked military targets, they had deliberately targeted schools, hospitals, and residential areas. Admiral Park was a small woman with gray hair and eyes that had seen too many battles. She had been fighting in space for over 30 years and had earned her position through skill and determination, not through politics or connections. She was exactly the kind of leader humanity needed for what was about to happen. Standing beside her was Commander Yoon Jae-sung, a tall man with scars on his face from a pirate attack on his own homeworld 10 years earlier. He had been waiting for this moment ever since he had watched his family die in that attack. While Council ships refused to respond to their distress calls, the communication officer looked up from his station and spoke in a quiet voice. Admiral, the pirate fleet has been tracked to their base in the Corvash Nebula. Intelligence confirms they received support from Council species just as we expected they would. Admiral Park nodded slowly. She had been expecting this exact response from the Council. The alien leaders thought they could teach humanity a lesson by unleashing pirates on human colonies. They thought humans would panic and come crawling back to the negotiating table, begging for protection. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The Corvash Nebula was a massive cloud of gas and dust that stretched across several light years. It was filled with electromagnetic storms that made navigation almost impossible and sensor readings unreliable. The perfect place for pirates to hide their ships and plan their attacks. For over 200 years, the nebula had been declared off limits to military operations by the Galactic Council. They claimed it was too dangerous for large fleets to enter, and that any attempt to clean out the pirates would result in massive casualties. The Council had been lying about the dangers, but they had not been lying about the casualties. There would definitely be massive casualties in the Corvash Nebula, but they would not be human casualties. Admiral Park walked to the center of the bridge and looked around at her crew. Every officer present had been hand-picked for this mission. They were all veterans of the colonial wars, and they all understood exactly what humanity was about to reveal to the galaxy. Send a message to Earth Command. Admiral Park said in a calm voice. Tell them the Council has made their choice and shown their true nature. Request authorization for Protocol 7. The bridge fell completely silent. Every person present knew about Protocol 7, but none of them had ever expected to see it used. Protocol 7 was humanity's secret weapon, the thing they had been preparing for decades but had hoped they would never need to use. Protocol 7 was not just a military operation, it was a complete change in how humanity would interact with the rest of the galaxy. It meant the end of trying to fit in with alien society and the beginning of showing the galaxy what humans were really capable of when they stopped holding back. 2 hours later, the response came from Earth Command. Admiral Park read the message on her private screen and allowed herself a small smile. The authorization had come from President Choi. Hi, Jin herself, along with signatures from every major human military leader. The message was short and simple. Show them what humans really are. Admiral Park turned to her crew and spoke in a voice that carried to every corner of the bridge. All hands prepare for combat operations. We are going into the Corvash Nebula to remove a pirate threat that has existed for too long. She paused and looked each of her officers in the eye before continuing. But we are not just going to destroy some pirates, we are going to send a message to every species in the galaxy that the age of human weakness is over. The Indomitable began to move, followed by 15 other ships in the human fleet. But these were not the same ships that had been patrolling human space for the past 20 years. These ships had been secretly upgraded with technology that no alien species had ever seen. The quantum drive systems could move the ships faster than any known propulsion method. The energy shields could absorb damage that would destroy any other vessel in The galaxy, the weapon systems were based on principles that alien scientists thought were impossible, but the most important upgrade was not visible from the outside. Each ship was controlled by an artificial intelligence that could think and react. Faster than any biological brain, the AI systems could coordinate the actions of the entire fleet as if it was a single living organism. As the human fleet approached the Corvash Nebula, they detected another group of ships waiting for them. It was a Council enforcement fleet led by the massive dreadnought. Eternal Dominion High Admiral Korthak of the Vorthic Empire had come personally to witness what he expected to be humanity defeat. The Council ships arranged themselves in a blocking formation, clearly intending to prevent the human fleet from entering the Nebula. High Admiral Korthak sent a message to Admiral Park demanding that the human ships withdraw immediately. Admiral Park's response was broadcast on all frequencies so that every ship in the area could hear it. High Admiral Korthak, you are ordered to withdraw from this system immediately. Any interference with human military operations will be considered an act of war. The Vorthic Admiral reply was filled with arrogance and contempt. He told Admiral Park that her small fleet was outnumbered 3-1 and that she should surrender immediately to face judgment for her crimes against galactic peace. What happened next would be remembered as the moment when everything changed in the galaxy. Admiral Park looked at the tactical display showing the positions of all the ships in the area. The Council fleet was arranged in a perfect attack formation, exactly as human intelligence had predicted they would be. High Admiral, she said in a voice that was calm and professional, you are not outnumbered, you are simply outmatched. You have 30 seconds to begin withdrawal, or I will demonstrate the difference. The 30 seconds passed in complete silence. Every ship in both fleets was watching and waiting to see what would happen. High Admiral Korthak had spent his entire career believing that the Council military was the most powerful force in the galaxy. He had never lost a battle, and he was not about to start. Now the Eternal Dominion massive plasma cannons began to charge up, followed by every other weapon in the Council fleet. The alien ships moved into attack position and prepared to destroy what they thought was a small group of primitive human vessels. Admiral Park watched the enemy ships preparing to attack and felt no fear at all. She had been preparing for this moment for most of her adult life. She knew exactly what her ships could do, and she knew exactly what the Council ships could not do. The first shot came from the Eternal Dominion, a massive plasma blast that would have destroyed any normal ship. The energy beam struck the indomitable shields and simply disappeared, absorbed by technology that operated on principles the Council had never imagined. The return fire from the human fleet was devastating. Quantum torpedoes that could track their targets through any amount of interference, plasma cannons that could punch through any known shielding, energy weapons that struck with impossible accuracy across vast distances. The battle lasted exactly 12 minutes. When it was over, the Eternal Dominion was nothing but glowing debris drifting in space. High Admiral Korthak and his entire crew were dead. The few Council ships that survived the encounter fled in terror, broadcasting warnings to every corner of the galaxy. Admiral Park stood on the bridge of the Indomitable and watched the enemy ships retreating. She felt no satisfaction in the victory, only a deep sadness that it had been necessary. The Council had forced humanity to reveal their true strength, and now there would be no going back. The human fleet entered the Corvash Nebula and began hunting pirates. But the real hunt had already begun across the galaxy as every alien species tried to understand what they had just witnessed. Humanity had just announced their arrival as a galactic power, and nothing would ever be the same again. The Corvash Nebula stretched across the darkness of space like a massive storm cloud filled with swirling gases and crackling energy. Inside this dangerous maze of electromagnetic storms and dense matter clouds, the most feared pirates in the galaxy had built their secret base for over 2 centuries. These pirates had used the nebula as their headquarters, launching raids on merchant ships and unprotected colonies. The Galactic Council had declared the nebula off-limits to military operations, claiming it was too dangerous for large fleets to enter. The pirates had grown comfortable in their hidden stronghold. They had powerful ships stolen from military shipyards across the galaxy. They had weapons that could destroy entire cities, and they had the protection of the Council itself, which used them to do the dirty work that Council forces could not be seen doing when their sensors detected the approaching human fleet. The pirates assumed it was a rescue mission for the survivors of their recent attacks. They had no idea that they were about to face the most advanced military force in the galaxy. Admiral Park, so young, stood on the bridge of the Indomitable as her fleet moved deeper into the nebula. The swirling gases and energy storms that made the region so dangerous to other ships meant nothing to the advanced human vessels. Their quantum sensors could see through any interference, and their navigation systems could plot courses through the most chaotic environments. The tactical display showed dozens of pirate ships scattered throughout the nebula. Most of them were powered down with their crews, probably celebrating their recent victories with stolen goods and captured prisoners. They had no idea that death was approaching them through the cosmic storm. Admiral Park looked around at her bridge crew and saw the same determination in their eyes that she felt in her own heart. These pirates had attacked innocent people and killed human families. They had been protected by the Council for far too long, but that protection was about to end. Begin Operation Cleanse. Late Admiral Park ordered. What happened next would be studied in military academies for generations to come. The human fleet moved through the nebula like a perfectly coordinated machine. Each ship knew exactly where to go and exactly what to do. The artificial intelligence systems controlling the fleet could process information and make decisions faster than any biological brain. The first pirate ship to be destroyed never even knew it was under attack. A quantum torpedo materialized next to its hull and exploded with enough force to vaporize the entire vessel. The crew died instantly, never understanding what had killed them. Within minutes, the entire nebula was filled with the light of exploding ships. Human weapons that the pirates had never seen before struck with deadly accuracy. Plasma cannons that could punch through any armor, energy beams that could track moving targets across vast distances, hunter-killer drones that could think and adapt on their own. The pirates tried to fight back, but their weapons were useless against the human shields. Their ships were too slow to escape and too weak to survive the assault. Some of them tried to surrender, but the human fleet was not interested in taking prisoners. Today the battle lasted 4 hours, but it was not really a battle at all. It was an execution. The human fleet systematically destroyed every pirate ship in the nebula without taking a single casualty. When the operation was complete, the most dangerous pirate stronghold in the galaxy had been completely eliminated. But the real shock was yet to come. As the human fleet emerged from the nebula, they found themselves facing a massive Council enforcement fleet. The ships were arranged in perfect battle formation with the enormous dreadnought Eternal Dominion at the center. High Admiral Korthak of the Vorthak Empire had come personally to witness what he expected to be humanity humiliation. The Council fleet was 3 times larger than the human force and carried enough firepower to destroy entire planets. High Admiral Korthak had never lost a battle in his long career, and he was confident that today would be another easy victory. Admiral Park looked at the tactical display showing the positions of the enemy ships. She felt no fear, only a deep sadness that the Council had chosen to escalate the conflict. The alien leaders still did not understand what they were facing. High Admiral Korthak. Admiral Park said on an open communication channel, "You are ordered to withdraw from this system immediately. Any interference with human military operations will be considered an act of war." The response from the Vorthak Admiral was exactly what Admiral Park had expected. Arrogance mixed with contempt and a complete inability to understand that the balance of power in the galaxy had just shifted. "You dare threaten the Council enforcement fleet?" High Admiral Korthak replied, "You are outnumbered 3 to 1 human. Surrender now and face judgment for your crimes." Admiral Park looked around at her bridge crew and saw the same calm determination in their eyes that she felt in her own heart. These officers had trained their entire lives for this moment. They knew exactly what their ships could do, and they knew exactly what the enemy ships could not do. High Admiral Admiral Park said in a voice that was calm and professional, "You are not outnumbered. You are simply outmatched. You have 30 seconds to begin withdrawal, or I will demonstrate the difference." The 30 seconds passed in tense silence. High Admiral Korthak had built his reputation on never backing down from a fight. He had conquered worlds and destroyed fleets throughout his career. He was not about to be intimidated by what he saw as a small group of primitive human vessels. The Eternal Dominion massive plasma cannons began to glow with deadly energy, followed by every other weapon in the Council fleet. The alien ships moved into attack formation, confident that their superior numbers and firepower would quickly overwhelm the human forces. Admiral Park watched the enemy preparations with no emotion at all. She had been waiting for this moment for most of her adult life. She knew that what happened in the next few minutes would determine the future of humanity in the galaxy. The first shot came from the Eternal Dominion, a plasma beam powerful enough to destroy a city. The energy struck the indomitable shields and simply vanished, absorbed by technology that operated on principles the Council had never imagined. The return fire from the human fleet was swift and devastating. Quantum torpedoes that could phase through normal matter and explode inside enemy ships, plasma cannons that fired concentrated energy beams at near light speed, energy weapons that could track and destroy multiple targets simultaneously. The Council ships tried to maneuver, but their movements seemed sluggish compared to the human vessels. The alien commanders were used to fighting enemies who used the same basic technology they did. They had no experience dealing with weapons that could bend the laws of physics. High Admiral Korthak watched in growing horror as his fleet was systematically destroyed. Ship after ship exploded in brilliant flashes of light. His officers were shouting reports of impossible weapons and energy readings that made no sense. The Vorthak Admiral tried to retreat, but it was too late. The human ships moved with inhuman precision, cutting off escape routes and destroying fleeing vessels. The artificial intelligence systems controlling the human fleet could predict enemy movements and react faster than any biological crew. The battle lasted exactly 12 minutes. When it was over, the Eternal Dominion was the expanding cloud of glowing debris. High Admiral Korthak and his entire crew were dead. The few Council ships that survived the encounter fled in panic, broadcasting warnings to every corner of the galaxy. Admiral Park stood on the bridge of the Indomitable and watched the enemy ships disappearing into hyperspace. She felt no satisfaction in the victory, only a deep understanding that everything had changed. The Council had forced humanity to reveal their true strength, and now there would be consequences. The footage of the battle spread across the galaxy faster than the speed of light. News networks broadcast images of human ships effortlessly destroying Council forces. Political leaders called emergency sessions to discuss the impossible. Military analysts struggled to explain weapons that should not exist in the Galactic Council chambers. High Chancellor Vextar stood before the assembled representatives and tried to make sense of what had happened. The humans had just demonstrated military technology that was decades ahead of anything in the known galaxy. Intelligence reports flooded in from across Council space. Each report painted a more disturbing picture than the last. The human ships had used quantum weapons that could phase through normal matter, energy shields that could absorb unlimited damage, artificial intelligence systems that could coordinate fleet movements with perfect precision. But the most disturbing report came from the analysis of the battle itself. The human fleet had not just won, they had won without taking any casualties at all. Their ships had moved through the battle like they were invulnerable, like they were playing with opponents who posed no real threat. High Chancellor Vextar looked around at the panicked faces of his fellow Council members and realized that everything they thought they knew about humanity was wrong. The species they had dismissed as primitive and weak had just revealed themselves to be the most advanced military force in the galaxy. The real question was not how they had developed such technology, but how long they had been hiding it from the rest of the galaxy. And if they had been hiding their military capabilities, what else were they hiding? The age of Council dominance. The emergency session of the Galactic Council had been going on for 6 hours, and the panic in the chamber was growing with each passing minute. Representatives from dozens of species sat in their seats staring at the tactical displays that showed the impossible footage from the Corvash Nebula battle. High Chancellor Vextar stood at the center of the chamber, his 4 eyes reflecting the fear that every Council member was feeling. The images on the screens showed human ships moving with perfect coordination, destroying Council forces without taking a single casualty. Intelligence Director Nefak of the Kree Empire stepped forward carrying a datapad filled with analysis reports that made no sense. Her scaled face was pale with worry as She began to read from the impossible findings, my lord. Our technical analysis of the battle footage reveals weapons technology that should not exist. The human ships use quantum torpedoes that can phase through normal matter energy shields that operate on principles we do not understand, artificial intelligence systems that can coordinate fleet movements with inhuman precision. The chamber erupted in frightened discussions. Representatives whispered among themselves, trying to understand how the primitive humans had suddenly become the most advanced military force in the galaxy. The Zilani delegates were screeching in their bird-like voices, while the Vorthak representatives clicked their mandibles in confusion. High Chancellor Vexstar raised one of his massive arms, and the chamber slowly grew quiet. He had been thinking about the implications of what they had witnessed, and his conclusions were more disturbing than the battle itself. Director Nethak, he said in his deep voice, how long would it take to develop the technology we saw in that battle? The Kree intelligence director looked down at her datapad and calculated the numbers in her head. My lord, based on our understanding of quantum mechanics and energy manipulation, it would take decades of research, perhaps centuries, to develop weapons of this sophistication. Exactly, High Chancellor, Vexstar replied, and his voice carried a note of dread that made every representative in the chamber pay attention. These weapons, these ships, this technology was not developed in response to our recent actions. The humans have been preparing for this moment for a very long time. The implications hit the council like a physical blow. Every representative suddenly understood what the High Chancellor was saying. The humans had not suddenly become advanced overnight. They had been hiding their true capabilities for decades, pretending to be primitive while secretly developing the most powerful military technology in the galaxy. In the underground command center beneath the Himalayan mountains on Earth, President Choi Hyjin watched the council emergency session on her private monitors. Around her, the greatest minds in human history worked at their stations, coordinating the next phase of humanity plan. The command center was a marvel of human engineering, carved deep into the solid rock of the mountain and filled with technology that made the most advanced alien systems look like primitive toys. Holographic displays showed the positions of every ship in the galaxy, while quantum computers processed information faster than any biological brain could comprehend. Dr. Kongmin Seo, the head of the Human Defense Initiative, stepped up to the president carrying a report on the success of Phase 1. The old scientist had dedicated his life to this moment, and his eyes showed the satisfaction of seeing decades of work finally paying off. Phase 1 complete, Madam President, he reported. Council military assets in the Outer Rim are retreating. Their enforcement fleets are requesting reinforcements from the core worlds. President Choi nodded and walked to the massive display showing star charts of the entire galaxy. Red dots marked council military bases, blue dots showed human colonies, and green dots represented something else entirely, something the council had never suspected. The green dots were everywhere throughout council space, on worlds that had been under alien control for centuries, in the heart of the most secure systems in the galaxy. Each green dot represented a human agent or a hidden facility that had been operating in secret for decades. Begin Phase 2. President Choi ordered, it is time to show them what we have really been doing for the past 50 years across the galaxy, on hundreds of worlds that the council thought were completely under their control. Hidden facilities began to activate. Human agents who had lived double lives for decades suddenly revealed their true identities. Technology that had been disguised as primitive equipment showed its real capabilities. On the Vorthak homeworld of Vorth Prime, Chief Engineer Bae Sungwoo stood in the central power facility where he had worked for 15 years. The aliens had trusted him completely, never suspecting that their most reliable human engineer was actually a graduate of Earth's most elite military academy. Bae Sungwoo walked to the main control panel and began entering commands into systems he had helped design and maintain. His fingers moved across the controls with practiced ease as he took control of the entire planetary power grid. Attention, citizens of Vorth Prime. He spoke into the facility communication system. This is Agent Bae of the Human Defense Initiative. Your planetary defense grid is now under human control. Any attempt to harm human civilians on this world will result in immediate shutdown of all power systems. Similar scenes played out across council space. Human merchants on Zilani Trading stations revealed scanning equipment that had been cataloging military secrets for decades. Human workers on Kree mining worlds activated hidden weapons caches that had been smuggled in over years of careful planning. The scope of the human infiltration was staggering. Every major council world had human agents in key positions. Power plants, communication centers, transportation hubs, military facilities, all of them had been infiltrated by humans who had spent decades earning the trust of their alien supervisors. Back in the Galactic Council chambers, the reports were flooding in from across council space. Each message painted a more disturbing picture than the last. The humans had not just been hiding their military technology. They had been systematically infiltrating every aspect of galactic civilization. Intelligence Director Nefak stood before the assembled council reading report after report of human agents revealing themselves. The numbers were staggering. Over 50,000 confirmed agents, with the real number possibly much higher. Some of these agents had been in place for over 30 years, building lives, raising families, earning complete trust. High Chancellor Vexstar listened to the reports with growing horror. The humans had been playing a game that spanned decades, while the Council had been completely unaware that the game was even being played. They have been preparing for this war since first contact, Nafak reported, her voice hollow with shock. Every human diplomatic mission, every trade agreement, every cultural exchange, all of it was intelligence gathering. They have detailed files on our military capabilities, our political structures, our economic weaknesses, the tactical display. In the chamber updated to show the scope of human infiltration, red markers appeared on nearly every major council world, each one representing a human agent or hidden facility. The pattern was clear and terrifying. The humans had been systematically mapping every weakness in council defenses. How many of them are there? High Chancellor Vexstar asked, dreading the answer. Our current estimates suggest over 50,000 active agents. Nefak replied, but the true number could be much higher. Some of these agents have been in place for over 30 years. They have families, businesses, entire lives built around their cover identities. The implications were staggering. For 3 decades, while the Council had dismissed humanity as primitive and irrelevant, humans had been systematically infiltrating every aspect of galactic civilization. They had learned Council languages, studied Council technology, and most importantly, identified every weakness in Council defenses. My Lord, Nathak continued, there is something else. Our analysis suggests that humanity military technology is not their most dangerous asset. Their true strength lies in their ability to think strategically over decades, to plan and execute operations that span entire generations. High Chancellor Vexstar looked around at the panicked faces of his fellow council members and realized that they had been fighting a war for 30 years without even knowing it. The humans had been patient, careful, and methodical in their approach. While the Council had been dismissing them as primitive, the humans had been preparing for this exact moment. The species they had treated as inferior had been playing a game of strategy that was beyond anything the Council had imagined. The humans had not just started a war, they had been fighting it for decades, and the Council was only now beginning to understand how completely they had been outmaneuvered. The revelation was complete. Humanity had revealed themselves as the most advanced and most dangerous species in the galaxy, and they had been hiding among the Council all along, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The activation of humanity's sleeper network sent shockwaves through the galaxy that made the Corvash Nebula battle look like a minor disagreement. On over 300 worlds throughout Council space, human agents simultaneously revealed their true identities and began seizing control of critical infrastructure. Commander Lim Dayun sat in the captain chair of what appeared to be an ordinary cargo hauler drifting through the asteroid belt around the mining colony of Kepler 442b. For 5 years, she had played the role of a simple freight captain hauling supplies between the mining platforms and the main colony, but the cargo ship was not what it appeared to be. Hidden beneath its ordinary exterior was one of the most advanced warships in the human fleet. The mining colony itself was not what it appeared to be either. What the Council thought was a simple resource extraction operation was actually a heavily fortified military base. The Kree Empire had decided to make an example of Kepler 442b after human agents seized control of power systems on several Kree worlds. A massive fleet was approaching the system, carrying enough firepower to destroy the entire colony. The alien commanders expected to find panicked human civilians. Begging for mercy instead, they were about to discover that humanity had been preparing for this exact scenario for over a decade. Commander Lim watched her tactical display as the Kree fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the system. The alien ships moved in perfect formation, confident in their overwhelming numerical advantage. They had no idea that they were flying into the most sophisticated trap in galactic history. The asteroid belt around Kepler 442b contained over 10,000 individual rocks ranging in size from small boulders to planetoids several kilometers across. The Kree fleet scanned the belt with their sensors and detected exactly what they expected to see: mining equipment, cargo haulers, and processing facilities. What they did not detect were the weapon systems hidden inside the asteroids themselves. Over the past decade, human engineers had hollowed out dozens of the largest asteroids and converted them into massive weapons platforms. Each platform was disguised to look like ordinary mining equipment but contained enough firepower to destroy an entire fleet. This is Commander Lim Da-yoon of the Human Defense Fleet. She broadcast to the approaching ships, "You have entered a restricted military zone. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences." The response from the Kree admiral was exactly what Commander Lim had expected: arrogance, mixed with contempt and a complete inability to understand that the situation had changed. The alien commander ordered his fleet to attack what he thought were helpless mining platforms. The first Kree ship to open fire was targeting what appeared to be a simple or processing station. The plasma beam struck the station shields and was absorbed without causing any damage. Immediately, the station began to unfold, revealing its true nature as a heavily armed weapons platform. Across the asteroid belt, dozens of similar transformations began. The mining equipment shed its disguises and revealed itself as military hardware. The cargo haulers dropped their false hulls and showed their true nature as advanced warships. The processing facilities opened up to reveal massive railgun batteries. The return fire was devastating. Railguns accelerated projectiles to a significant fraction of light speed, punching through Kree shields like they were made of paper. The disguised human warships revealed weapons that made their previous battles look restrained: plasma cannons that could melt through any known armor, energy beams that could track and destroy multiple targets simultaneously. Commander Lim watched as the Kree fleet tried to respond to the unexpected assault. Their ships were powerful, but they were designed to fight enemies who used similar technology. They had no experience dealing with weapons that could bend the laws of physics. The battle lasted 18 minutes. When it was over, the entire Kree fleet was either destroyed or fleeing for their lives. The few ships that managed to escape broadcast warnings to every corner of the galaxy. The humans had turned an entire star system into a weapons platform. The real message was not in the battle itself. It was in what the battle revealed. The mining colony had been a military base all along. The asteroids had been converted into weapons platforms years ago. The entire system was a fortress disguised as a simple industrial operation, and there were dozens of similar systems throughout Council space. Back on Earth in the Underground Command Center, President Choi Hae-jin received reports from across the galaxy. The scope of humanity long-term planning was finally being revealed to the Council, and the alien leaders were beginning to understand the true extent of their miscalculation. Dr. Kong Min Seo approached the president carrying a datapad filled with status reports from human agents throughout the galaxy. The old scientist had spent his entire career preparing for this moment, and his eyes showed the satisfaction of seeing decades of work finally paying off. Phase 2 is proceeding ahead of schedule, he reported. Our agents have successfully taken control of critical infrastructure on over 200 Council worlds. The alien governments are beginning to lose control of their own territories. President Choi nodded and walked to the massive holographic display showing the current state of galactic politics. The map was changing by the hour as more and more worlds declared independence from the Council or announced their neutrality in the growing conflict. What about the Council response, she asked. Their fleets are in chaos, Dr. Kong replied. Many of their commanders are refusing to attack systems that might have hidden human defenses. Several species have begun secret negotiations with our diplomatic corps. The president smiled as she looked at the tactical display. The Council had spent decades dismissing humanity as primitive and irrelevant. Now they were discovering that the species they had ignored had been systematically undermining their authority for over 30 years on. The Vorthak homeworld chief engineer Bei Sungwoo stood in the central power facility watching alien security forces surround the building. They had finally realized that their most trusted human engineer was actually a military agent, but it was too late to stop what he had already accomplished. The planetary defense grid was under human control. The communication networks were broadcasting human messages to every corner of the world. The transportation systems were shut down, preventing the movement of military forces. Bei Sungwoo had spent 15 years building the trust of his alien supervisors. He had helped design the very systems he was now using against them. He had been patient, careful, and methodical in his approach, waiting for the perfect moment to reveal his true purpose. Similar scenes were playing out across Council space. Human agents who had lived double lives for decades were finally showing their true colors. They had been teachers, scientists, engineers, doctors, and merchants, all of them gathering intelligence and preparing for this exact moment. The scope of the human infiltration was beyond anything the Council had imagined. Every major military installation had human agents in key positions. Every critical infrastructure system had been compromised. Every secure communication network had been penetrated. But the most disturbing discovery was not the number of human agents or the sophistication of their operations. It was the realization that humanity had been planning this war for over 30 years. While the Council had been completely unaware that they were under attack, the humans had been patient. They had been willing to sacrifice decades of apparent weakness in order to position themselves for this moment. They had endured insults, dismissals, and humiliations, all while systematically undermining the very foundations of Council power. Intelligence Director Nefak stood before the emergency session of the Galactic Council, reading report after report of human operations across Council space. The numbers were staggering and the implications were terrifying, my lord, she reported to High Chancellor Vextar. Our analysis suggests that every major Council world has been infiltrated, every critical system has been compromised, every secure facility has been penetrated. The humans have been preparing for this war since the day they made first contact with us. The Council chamber fell silent as the full scope of humanity deception became clear. They had been fighting a war for 30 years without knowing it. The enemy had been living among them, learning their weaknesses and preparing for this exact moment. High Chancellor Vextar looked around at the panicked faces of his fellow representatives and realized that everything they thought they knew about galactic politics was wrong. The humans had not just started a rebellion, they had been conducting the most sophisticated intelligence operation in galactic history. The species they had dismissed as primitive had been playing a game of strategy that was beyond anything the Council had imagined, and now, after 30 years of careful preparation, humanity was finally ready to show the galaxy what they were really capable of. The underground war was over, and the humans had won before most of the galaxy even knew it had begun. 6 months had passed since humanity's dramatic exit from galactic diplomacy, and the galaxy looked completely different from the one that had existed before. The Galactic Council still met in their massive chamber, but their authority was broken, and their influence was fading with each passing day. President Choi Haijin stood in the observation deck of humanity's newest space station, watching ships from dozens of different species dock at the trading ports below the station. Called Haven had become the new center of galactic commerce in just 6 months, replacing the old Council-controlled trading hub. Species that had once looked down on humanity with contempt now came to them seeking trade agreements, technology exchanges, and, most importantly, protection from the chaos that had spread through former Council space. The balance of power had shifted completely, and everyone in the galaxy knew its Secretary of State Park Ji-won approached the president carrying a datapad filled with diplomatic requests from across the galaxy. The number of species wanting to establish formal relations with humanity had grown every day since the Corvash Nebula battle. The Zelani delegation is requesting another meeting, she reported. They are offering to share their advanced medical technology in exchange for our defensive systems. President Choi nodded. The Zelani had been among the most arrogant species in the old Council always dismissing human requests with barely concealed disgust. Now they were practically begging for human protection against the independence movements spreading through their territory. Schedule the meeting for tomorrow. President Choi said, "What about the Vorthak Empire?" Still refusing to negotiate. Directly, Secretary Park replied, "But their regional governors have been reaching out through unofficial channels. They are losing control of their outer territories, and their military is requesting permission to withdraw from several systems." The president smiled. The Vorthak Empire rigid hierarchy had become its greatest weakness. Once their military superiority was challenged, their subject species began demanding independence. Human agents had been quietly supporting these independence movements, providing weapons, tactical advice, and most importantly, hope to rebels who had been oppressed for centuries. "What is the status of the council itself?" President Choi asked. High Chancellor Vextar has called for a formal ceasefire. Secretary Park reported he is requesting a meeting to discuss what he calls mutual coexistence. His exact words were that the galaxy is big enough for both human and council authority. President Choi turned from the observation window, her expression thoughtful. "After 20 years of telling us we were too primitive for equal treatment, now they want to coexist as equals. It appears so, Madame President. Our intelligence suggests they are facing complete internal collapse. Too many species are questioning council authority, and several major members are considering withdrawal." The president walked to her office and activated a holographic display showing the current state of galactic politics. The map told the story better than any report could. The old council sphere of influence had shrunk by nearly 40%. Independent worlds were declaring themselves neutral. Former council allies were switching sides or choosing complete isolation. Red zones marked areas where civil wars were raging as subject species fought for independence. Yellow zones showed regions where council authority was disputed. Green zones represented the growing number of worlds that had signed treaties with humanity. "What do you think, Secretary Park?" President Choi asked. "Should we negotiate with them?" Secretary Park considered the question carefully. "From a strategic standpoint, we have achieved our primary objectives. The Council can no longer ignore us or treat us as inferiors, but there is a larger question. What kind of galaxy do we want to help create?" President Choi nodded. That was indeed the real question. Humanity had proven they could fight and win against any opponent. They had demonstrated technological superiority and strategic thinking that impressed even their enemies, but victory in war was only the beginning. "The truth is, Secretary Park," President Choi said quietly, "we never wanted to destroy the Council. We wanted to change it, to create a galaxy where species are judged by their actions, not their age or appearance, where diplomacy is based on mutual respect, not fear." 3 days later, Ambassador Kim Tae-ho walked into the Galactic Council chambers for the first time since his dramatic exit 6 months earlier. This time he was not alone. Behind him walked representatives from dozens of species, all of them allies of humanity, who had chosen to stand with the humans rather than the old order. The chamber looked very different from the last time Kim Tae-ho had stood at the speaking platform. Half the seats were empty, their former occupants having abandoned the council entirely. The remaining representatives looked nervous and uncertain, unsure of their place in the new galactic order. High Chancellor Vextar stood as Kim Tae-ho approached the platform. For the first time in their long relationship, the massive alien leader showed genuine respect. His 4 eyes focused on the human ambassador with an expression that was very different from the bored contempt he had shown before. Ambassador Kim, High Chancellor Vextar said formally, "The Galactic Council recognizes the human alliance as an equal partner in galactic affairs. We request the opportunity to discuss new agreements based on mutual benefit and respect." Kim Tae-ho looked up at the towering alien leader and smiled. It was not the same diplomatic smile he had worn for 20 years. This was the smile of a negotiator who held all the cards and knew it. High Chancellor Kim Tae-ho replied, "Humanity is willing to discuss the future of galactic civilization, but this time we talk as equals or we do not talk at all." Chamber was completely silent as the implications of those words sank in. The old order, where the council dictated terms to lesser species, was over. The new order would be based on negotiation between equals, or there would be no order at all. High Chancellor Vextar nodded slowly, understanding that he had no choice but to accept the new reality. The council had tried to teach humanity a lesson about power, and had instead learned a lesson themselves about the dangers of underestimating an opponent. Over the following weeks, new agreements were negotiated that would reshape galactic civilization. The Council would continue to exist, but only as one voice among many. The old system of unanimous votes that allowed any species to block human proposals was replaced with majority rule. Trade agreements were rewritten to benefit all parties equally. Territorial disputes would be settled by neutral arbitration rather than council favoritism. Military cooperation would be voluntary rather than enforced. And most importantly, any species that chose independence from the council would be free to leave without facing retaliation. But the most significant change was not written in any treaty or agreement. It was the simple recognition that humanity had earned their place at the table through strength, wisdom, and patience. They had shown the galaxy that true power came not from the ability to dominate others, but from the ability to build something better. President Choi Hae-jin stood once again in the observation deck of Haven Station, watching the ships coming and going in the busy trading ports below. But now the scene looked different to her. The ships carried not just goods and passengers, but hope for a better future. Dr. Kang Min-seo approached, carrying the final reports on humanity. Long-term strategic operations. The old scientist had dedicated his life to preparing for the moment when humanity would take their rightful place in galactic civilization. Mission accomplished, he said simply. We have achieved everything we set out to do 30 years ago. President Choi nodded, but her expression was thoughtful. No, Dr. Kang, she replied, we have achieved everything we set out to do in the first phase. Now we begin the much harder task of building the kind of galaxy we want to live in. The galaxy had learned a hard lesson about underestimating humanity, but perhaps more importantly, humanity had learned something about themselves. They were not just survivors or warriors. They were builders of a new kind of civilization, one where strength and wisdom worked together to create something better than what had come before. The age of human diplomacy, backed by unquestioned strength, had begun, and for the first time in galactic history, diplomacy truly meant negotiation between equals rather than submission to superior force. The galaxy would never be the same again.